Alright, so if you've been on Roblox basically any time within the last week or two, you'll have seen that Jujutsu Infinite dropped to surprisingly a lot of backlash. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing Jujutsu Infinite and seeing whether or not it's actually that bad of a game, or see if it's a game that's honestly overlooked, and if it's something that's actually worth your time. Anyways, let's get right into the video. Alright guys, so before we start the critical part of the review, I want to say that I'm not max level in Jujutsu Infinite. I'm nowhere near. So if there is stuff that's very high level difficulty, I know a lot of people have said that the nightmare levels of bosses particularly are very fun. Obviously, I haven't experienced that part of the game yet. I'll probably make some videos in the future experiencing that part of the game and saying what I think about it. But just know for this review that I've basically done everything at a somewhat low difficulty setting, so nothing that's too high level has been experienced yet by me. This is coming from someone who's relatively new to the game. But yeah, let's get right into the review. Alright, so part 1 of the review is the game's tutorial and how I think the game looks. Honestly, I'm going to give Jujutsu Infinite a lot of praise here. I feel like it looks insanely good. The tutorial, I could genuinely see being in a game that has been a AAA game, something that's very polished. The tutorial, you can tell the developers put a lot of effort into it. It looks very polished. Everything about it just looks insanely good. The little time slowdown whenever it requires you to press a button, I feel is a very nice touch. There's some other stuff as well, just having the graphics be so good, letting you play as an overpowered character at the start, I feel is something that games do well. For example, Metroid Prime also allows you to play fairly overpowered at the first chapter of the game, but then takes away that power, something that Jujutsu Infinite does as well, which I feel is always very fun. It lets the player kind of get a glimpse of what's going to be at max level before kind of resetting them back to level 1. I love the way the game does this. It kind of hooks you at the start, and then it sends you into the actual game. Now, as for the actual game, I'm gonna say it falls off fairly fast after the tutorial. I did have a lot of fun kind of starting the story mode. The story mode was pretty slow paced at the start, but I did just getting to kind of have a altered version of the JJK story. I still found it interesting enough to keep playing, and it did hook me until I got to a section where it required about 20 levels above where I currently was in order to keep on with the storyline. Now, that wasn't a problem until I went over to the quest line and basically the progression area. Now, I want to say that I'm no newbie to bandit beater games. I've played Blox Fruits, I've played other games like that. This game is a bandit beater. There's no way around it. This game is in all essence a bandit beater. There's 4 or 5 quests that you can do throughout the whole game. That's going to be how you level up. Yes, there's investigations and bosses, which I've heard are really fun on higher difficulties, but the main progression arc through the game is just bandit beating. Honestly, I have to say, even while that's the case, the bandit beating's a lot funner than you'd expect from a game like this. I feel what people don't talk about is just how polished the actual, quote-unquote, bandit beating experience is. Now, when it comes to something like bandit beating, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, there's no real experience there. However, in my mind, and this is more my personal opinion on the game, I feel the actual experience of it is fairly fun. Yes, you're defeating the same enemies, same 5 enemies, same boss, over and over and over. However, there's a level of polish to things like Black Flash and to other abilities that make it more fun than you'd actually expect. Especially my favorite part of the game, the aerial targeting system while holding E. I think aerial combat's really cool, so to see it in a Roblox game done to this level of polish is honestly really fun, and I love the way that Jujutsu Infinite does this. Overall, I'd say progression's not the game's strong suit. This is probably where I'd critique it the most. In essence, I'd say the game's a lot like Blox Fruits. It is a bandit beater. However, I wouldn't say it's as bad. To me, it comes off as a very polished Blox Fruits, but still a Blox Fruits type progression. Alright, next I want to have the actual open segments of the game. Basically the bosses, what those are all about, and whether or not they're actually fun. Now, bosses are extremely easy on easier difficulties. Basically impossible to die to them. I don't know many players that would have much difficulty at all with the bosses. However, on higher difficulty, if you're a fan of games that are particularly around memorizing and doing stuff like that, memorization patterns, such as Elden Ring, for example, you'll honestly have some fun with nightmare level difficulty bosses. I could see these levels of bosses being really fun to many players, and while maybe they're not the thing that I want to do, especially on easier difficulties, they are a selling point for the game. I feel having bosses and locking a lot of progression around them is nice. It gives players an incentive to go defeat these bosses to get very high tier cursed advanced tools and stuff like that. And honestly, I do like the way they did them. However, I do think it should be slightly rebalanced at earlier difficulties to make it less of a bandit beater and more of something that's like actually involved. Alright, next we have the loot system and the little chests that you can open throughout the game. Now, you can open these chests after you do a set amount of missions that you're getting. And honestly, these are probably where I'm going to put most of my critique into the game and why I don't like it. This chest system, in my opinion, feels very, very bad. And honestly, it feels like it doesn't respect the player's time. Basically, you get a couple of these chests every couple quests you do. And you can open them by hitting like some buttons. And basically, there's certain tiers of rarities for items, and these items will be different depending on what rarity tier you end up getting. This feels very, very similar to something like Type Soul, which I'll put a comparison up if I can find one. But I believe it was Invasions, gave you very similar like reward systems from it. I'm not sure if that was Type Soul or if that was Peroxide. I know one of those games did it, where Invasions would give you particular like loot tiers from cards, and you could see what you got. I feel like Invasions did it a lot better than what this game does, because realistically, from chest drops, there's not that many useful things you can get. Early game, yes, you can get like some swords and armor, and that's fairly useful, but outside of that, there's nothing from these chests they're really going to be using that much, because realistically, a 30% stat buff is not going to be needed in this game. This game's like piss easy, and honestly, I feel like buffing a player's stats, you really don't need that when this game's already like mind-numbingly easy besides nightmare difficulty. Additionally, I know Eclipse and a lot of other YouTubers have said this, but the button that like whenever the chests float around you whenever you're in combat, bro, that I didn't think that would be as much of a difficulty until I actually had it happen to me. I was defeating a couple of enemies and I had some chests spawn around me, and bro, it was so hard to actually just get into the combat. I literally had to fly away for a short amount of time so I could go ahead, open the chest, and go back into combat. And that just completely broke immersion. And honestly, you should not be doing that whenever you have a game. You never want to break immersion from the player because it just makes them uninterested in the game. Overall, I feel like the chest system definitely needs an overhaul, and I feel like it's important to just put these chests in the inventory, let the player open them anytime they want, and give them other loot. Give them stuff like crafting materials, or stuff like a small amount of money, stuff that you're actually going to use, not just stat buffs and very low quality clothing. Alright. Finally, we have the gambling part of the game and whether or not it's a cash grab. Now, this game is essentially gambling. A lot of the technique rolls, you're going to be gambling for basically any techniques in the game. Techniques are like abilities and basically what makes you powerful in the game. Kind of similar to fruits in Blox Fruits. Basically, you're given a set amount of spins at the start of the game, I think around 10, and with these 10 spins, you can get as many techniques as you want within those 10 spins. Now, 10 spins is basically nothing, especially considering that a special grade technique is below a 1 in 100 chance. You're going to be spinning a lot more than 10 times to get a special grade technique, and yes, I know there's going to be that one kid in the comment section that's like, well, actually, I got a special grade in my first 3 spins. While yes, that's a possibility, that's not what this game is modeled around. This game's modeled around the fact that you're going to be buying more rerolls to hopefully get a special grade technique. Honestly, I don't think techniques are as important as players think they are, because when I didn't have a technique, I was still doing fairly good. I feel like you can still do pretty good with just a physical build, you know, like spamming Black Flash and stuff like that, with a little bit of techniques, but honestly, they're not that important. I'd say definitely this game does have an unfair monetization system. All I'm asking for is that you can get monetized items in a realistic, like an in-game way, if that makes sense. Basically, all I'm asking is you can get stuff like Heavenly Restriction, Technique Bag, rerolls, actually within the game. Like, let me do quests where I can sacrifice a ton of items I grinded for to get something like Heavenly Restriction. Like, that's all I want, is just to be able to have a free player experience that's as good as the grinded experience. I think that's the thing that this game needs to improve on the most, but once that's improved on, I feel like this game can improve a lot. Alright, so now in summary, do I think Jujutsu Infinite's a bad game? No, it is a bandit beater. However, if bandit beaters are your type of game, definitely go ahead, give it a try. It's a very high quality one at that, and overall I'd say it's a decent game. Now, if I got anything wrong, let me know in the comments, as I plan to make more Jujutsu Infinite videos in the future. But yeah, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. More anime adventures and other tower defense videos will be out soon as well. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. It's me, MrMoogma, signing off. Goodbye.